Hey guys, I'm Dr. Kim Sage, and this video is really a challenging one in that as I've been talking about mama trauma, and the more and more and more I understand and read and explore resources, the more it occurs to me how deeply embedded this belief is that we are never supposed to question our mother's love, that it is taboo for us to talk badly about her, given the sort of profound role that a mother is supposed to have in a child's life. And if you look at, culture and art and society, mother is often held, and as it should be in best case scenarios, in a very sacred role. But I do want to talk a little bit about why I think it's important that you give yourself permission to even explore your mama trauma. The problem is we often believe that any mother's love is healthy love, and that if it's not, then there's something wrong with the child, that there can't possibly be something wrong with the mother. And why do I say this? I say this because of the countless places we can feel ashamed to talk badly about our mothers, to priests and therapists who say, oh, it's not that bad, to those who try to explain or justify, or oh, they had a disorder and that's not okay. And of course, the disorder, like in borderline or narcissism, it deserves compassion too. But the problem is we can get so hooked into justifying the disorder that we minimize the child's experience. And to be honest, with borderline, in terms of me making these videos, that's where I've had to walk the most difficult line. The sad problem is that for narcissists, I think there's become this culture of just completely crapping on them and forgetting that their wounds came from somewhere too. But it seems more permissible to talk badly about them. But then if you talk badly about a borderline experience, you may be potentially stigmatizing or labeling. And I think that's really not okay, not for those who suffer and not for those who received the suffering. So we have to get to a place where we can be more honest about the fact that not all mothers are great mothers and not all fathers are great fathers. And sometimes it has to do with a label or a disorder, and other times it doesn't. In fact, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. In terms of validating our pain, it matters because when you have a label like this and you realize your parent did suffer or does suffer from a severe mental illness, it does at least give you an understanding of, okay, this makes sense. As I've said before, because love can be so complicated in certain disorders. It's not, all black and white. It's not all evil or the witch, as some people talk about, which I think is valid. But it really can vary, as borderline can truly vary on the spectrum, so can narcissism. And we don't, necessarily see these perfect classic versions. There's often these nuanced behaviors. It's good sometimes, it's bad sometimes. But the problem comes from being a child of a mother, especially, or the primary, attachment person who is supposed to be so sacred. And frankly, I think that we crap more on dads, and that's more acceptable than crapping on moms. But they both oftentimes are worthy of those judgments for not being what they should have been. But I think really for mothers, we often see fathers or partners or wives of mothers who enabled the behavior. Oh, that's just how she is. That's your mom. You shouldn't talk that way. You should be forgiving. And oftentimes there's not a healthy place for forgiveness. You can forgive the fact that it happened to you and make peace with that. But you can also forgive that they struggled. But you cannot necessarily forgive and then allow yourself to be repeatedly wounded. And I think that is the most complicated with mothers. I've heard story and story and story again and again and again of people that would say, well, I tried to tell someone about it. I tried to tell my dad about it, or my therapist or my friend, but they all thought I was being too harsh. That, oftentimes certain people can present really well when they're not in your family. And so then you get even more ashamed, even more convinced that there's something wrong with you, because how could you reject this mother? Even if it's it's your child's grandparent. Oftentimes your kids won't understand until they get older and they see the behaviors about why you feel the way you do, because that toxicity has always been that way. And the deep core wound, and I say this all the time, but I think this is really true for any kind of mama trauma, is the child's lack of validation, and that what they feel, what they experienced is real, was real, and matters. And it's not necessarily always okay or always forgivable or always healable and manageable. When it is, it's great when a parent can work on themselves and get healthier and stronger and own their behaviors and make amends and make repairs, which many people can do. It's amazing. I have seen amazing things happen with clients who have set, these boundaries with their moms in therapy or dads, and they've responded, and it's been rocky, but over time they get to a place where it's manageable. But that's the best case scenario. The reality is oftentimes it is more coming to terms with who they really are, the damage they've done, the damage they continue to do to you in your life, and the fact that you are worthy of setting the boundary, of going no contact if you need to, or to keeping them at a distance, at bay, even though they may not like it, or the family says, why are you pushing your mother away? Why don't you let her come over on Thanksgiving? Why is it one holiday a year? People will push and prod and try to get you to break down your boundaries. And that's what makes, I think, this work with mothering issues so complicated, that you must know that tuning out the sound of everyone else and listening to your own voice and doing the work with someone you trust who helps you understand your sort of traumatic childhood responses and behaviors and relationship issues to date and the past, and the parent you have, especially if they have a more severe way of being in the world, is really important. The problem is, what often gets in the way is that we feel like as children we can't stand the loss, that as much as we don't want their behavior to hurt us so much, we'll be left alone, we'll be abandoned, we'll be guilty, it's our fault. And the sad part is, I've seen so many people I know who cannot set the boundary because even though they will tell me, like, I literally hate my mother, I hate this person, they will stay in it year in and year out, holding on to some remnant of, but if she dies, I'll be alone, but you already are alone, right? Or I need her inheritance, or, but there's no one else in my life, and yet that relationship is catastrophically destructive. And so the core of it is, it really does start with you being able to tolerate and hold the abandonment that you will feel, even when you set the boundary of little to no contact, or of a different relationship. That bubbling up guilt that's often been trained in you to exist doesn't just disappear whenever you start setting the boundaries. And so it's really important to know that you're allowed to feel that guilt, but living in it will not help you change your experience and truly heal your own attachment wounds and your own trauma story if you don't. And so it's just really important that, this can manifest in all kinds of dynamics, whether it's a parent with narcissism or borderline or depression or rage issues, right? It can really run the gamut, OCD, hoarding, right? There's all these different dynamics that can happen as a result. But the core of it is beginning with you accepting and acknowledging that you are worthy of healing and that your story does matter, that you are not a bad person for wanting to hold your mom accountable, that you're not a bad person for not speaking to them anymore. I have seen many people share, even on this channel, that they had to go no contact because they just could not live in it anymore. And even though they're in no contact, and even though the daily stressors are better, it's very common to have still deep underlying guilt. But beneath all of that is the deep longing, sadness, and wound, and the grieving for the mother you wished you'd had, the loss of the fantasy, the reconciliation that, is it love? What really is love? And was I loved by that parent? And guess what? What if it wasn't love? What does that mean to come to terms with the fact that you were raised by a parent or parents who were not able to love you? Even though, as you look back on it, it's been the only love you've ever known. It seems so real and so true. And it doesn't mean there isn't something to that relationship. But you have to ask yourself, what does real love look like? And that's another video. But I do want you to know that loving yourself enough to stop the cycle is truly the most important thing you will ever do for healing your life, especially if you are still in the mama trauma bond or the papa trauma bond, which I keep saying I'm going to make videos on soon, but especially if you're in those. It is the core center of all the work to heal the relationships with yourself and everyone else in your life. And so I hope you'll know you're worthy of it, and I hope you can lay down your guilt and know that you don't need to validate your story with your mother to anyone. It is your story. And frankly, if you have a therapist and a good one, that is the only person you shouldn't have to validate at a minimum. But hopefully you have supportive friends and partners and spouses, but you may not. Your circle may have people around you saying, why are you doing that to your mom? She's not that bad. She's old. She's going to die. Yeah, but no one gets to torture you and hurt you and wound you throughout your life. You weren't able to control it as a child, but you are, as I keep saying today. So I want you to know that you're worthy of that. But I really wanted to share that I think the root of this is it's so hard to even peel back the reality of how bad it can feel to talk about these wounds, but how good it can feel to know that you finally stood up and protected yourself, and you don't owe anyone an explanation for your own healing. So thanks for watching. See you soon. Stay safe and well. And don't forget to subscribe and click the bell. And that way you'll be notified when I post new videos. I'll see you soon. Bye guys. Thanks for watching.